My mother-in-law introduced my replacement at Christmas dinner, saying, unlike some people who'd rather waste their lives painting while smirking, she didn't know I'd been recording everything for months. I smiled and said, "How lovely, Emma. Corporate law must be fascinating. Which firm are you with?" The shock on Patricia's face was worth 7 years of her passive-aggressive comments. The woman she'd introduced as my replacement, a blonde in her 20s, wearing a red dress identical to one Patricia had bought me 3 years ago, glanced nervously between us before answering. "Henderson and Associates. I specialize in family law, actually divorce cases." I took a sip of wine, letting that sink in around the table. How convenient. My husband James shifted uncomfortably, his face flushed with more than just alcohol. After 10 years together and 7 years of marriage, he still couldn't meet my eyes when his mother orchestrated her manipulations. But this time felt different. This time, Patricia had overplayed her hand. "Emma's also from a good family," Patricia continued, as if ticking items off a shopping list. "The Weatherfords of Connecticut. Her father's a federal judge." "Very well connected," added James's sister Vivian with a smirk, "and fertile. She mentioned wanting at least 4 children." I maintained my composure the same way I had through 7 years of these family dinners. 7 years of being told my art career was just a hobby, that my choice to delay children was selfish, that my refusal to quit working was emasculating to James. But tonight would be different. 4 children, I repeated thoughtfully. "That's ambitious. I hope your prenup accounts for that, Emma. Children are expensive." The table went silent. Patricia's perfectly Botoxed face attempted a frown. "Prenup?" Emma's voice wavered. "Oh, did Patricia not mention?" I reached for the green beans I'd prepared from scratch, along with the rest of this elaborate meal. James insisted on one when we married, ironclad. In case of divorce, all assets remain separate. The house, investments, business holdings, everything stays with whoever brought it to the marriage. What I needed to explain to Emma, and remind Patricia, was exactly who held the power in this situation. Because while Patricia had spent months orchestrating this little dinner theater, she'd fundamentally misunderstood the financial dynamics of my marriage to her son. The house we were sitting in, this 6-bedroom colonial in Westchester that Patricia loved to brag about to her friends, belonged to me. I'd inherited it from my grandmother 2 years before James and I even met. The prenup Patricia was now trying to dismiss had been James's idea, not mine. He'd wanted to maintain his pride as a provider, he'd said, protect his assets. I'd agreed because I had nothing to hide. What James hadn't counted on was how our respective careers would develop over the next 7 years, while he'd remained in the same position at his father's company, a comfortable but unremarkable role in middle management that came with a $78,000 salary, but no real advancement. My art career had exploded. What started as weekend gallery shows had evolved into a full-scale business. My paintings now sold for 5 figures each, with my last piece going for $47,000. The Whitmore Gallery was planning a retrospective of my work with an estimated value of $850,000 for the entire collection. I had a waiting list of collectors and a financial portfolio that would make Patricia's head spin, but I'd never corrected her assumption that I was some struggling artist dependent on her son's income. It had been useful, actually, letting her think she held all the cards. My financial advisor, Marcus Blackwood, had been very clear about the strategic advantage of maintaining this misconception while building my assets quietly. "Well, obviously the prenup would be renegotiated," Patricia said quickly. "James has built substantial wealth since then." "Has he?" I asked innocently. "I hadn't noticed. Still working at your husband's company, right? Same position for what is it now, 5 years? Robert, James's father, coughed into his napkin. He'd always been the quieter parent, content to let Patricia run the show, but I caught the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. He knew the truth about James's financial situation better than anyone. "James is being groomed for leadership," Patricia insisted, unlike some people who play with paint all day. Speaking of playing with paint, I said, turning to Emma, did Patricia show you my studio? It's in the east wing of the house. Beautiful light in the mornings. Emma looked confused. Your house? Patricia said, James. The house is mine, I clarified, inherited from my grandmother 2 years before James and I married. That's why it's not part of the marital assets. The prenup was very specific about premarital property. Current market value is approximately $2 per million, according to my most recent appraisal. I watched the information sink in. Emma was sharp. I could see her lawyer's mind recalculating. A corporate lawyer's salary was good, but not buy a 6-bedroom colonial in Westchester good. But surely James has equity, Patricia started. Oh, no, I interrupted. James was very clear about keeping finances separate. He pays me rent, actually, $2,800 per month, below market rate, of course. I'm not heartless. You charge your husband rent? Vivian's voice dripped disdain. His idea, I said cheerfully. He said it would help him maintain his pride as a provider. I have all the emails where he insisted on it. So organized, my James. James reached for the wine bottle, his third refill of the evening. His silence spoke volumes. He knew I was telling the truth, and more importantly, he knew there was much more I could say. The recording device in my purse had been capturing every word of this conversation, just like it had captured Patricia's phone call to the matchmaker last month, where she'd offered to pay a $5,000 finder's fee for the right candidate, just like it had recorded her conversation with Vivian at Thanksgiving about handling the Meredith problem with a budget of up to $15,000 for legal fees. Just like it had documented James's drunken confession about his mother working on a solution to our marriage issues. 6 months of recordings, actually. Ever since I'd started noticing the signs that something was brewing, the hushed phone conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, James's sudden interest in our prenup documents, his new habit of working late on nights when Patricia called him. I'd spent weeks documenting every interaction, creating detailed logs with timestamps, and building a comprehensive file that my attorney, Helen Crawford, had called prosecutorial quality. Emma won't be some struggling artist, Patricia rallied. She'll be a true partner in James's success. I'm hardly struggling, I said mildly. Did James not mention? My last exhibition sold out completely, gross sales of $340,000. The Whitmore Gallery wants to do a retrospective next year with projected sales of over $800,000. One lucky break doesn't make a career, Patricia dismissed. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to my banking app. You're right. That's why I've been careful. 7 years of sales, commissions, and investments. My financial advisor is very pleased with the portfolio. I turned the screen slightly so Emma could see the account balance. $1,847,392. Patricia's eyes tried to glimpse the screen while she maintained her disapproving expression. Money talk at dinner is tacky, dear. But introducing my replacement at Christmas dinner is appropriate. I set down my phone. Interesting etiquette rules in this family. Emma pushed back her chair slightly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Patricia said you were leaving, that you and James were separated, that divorce was imminent. What else did she tell you, Emma? The younger woman's face flushed. She said you couldn't have children, that you'd tricked James into marriage knowing you were barren. Barren? I laughed. Actually laughed. How medieval. No, Emma, I'm not barren. I'm on very effective birth control because I chose not to have children with a man who lets his mother audition my replacements at family dinners. How dare you? Patricia started. Oh, I dare. I cut her off, my calm finally cracking. 7 years of daring, Patricia. 7 years of smiling while you undermined my career, insulted my family, and tried to control my reproductive choices. But introducing my replacement while I'm sitting right here? That's a new low even for you. You're being hysterical. James finally spoke, his words slightly slurred. Mother just invited a friend for dinner. A friend who happens to be a divorce attorney who wants 4 kids. I stood, placing my napkin on the table. How convenient. Tell me, James, did you know about this? Or are you as spineless as always? Don't speak to him that way, Patricia snapped. You've never appreciated what you have, a good man from a good family. A man who hasn't touched me in 6 months, I said, watching James pale. A man who opened a separate bank account 3 months ago and has been transferring money from our joint account without my knowledge. A man whose browser history shows he's been looking at apartments in the city, specifically 1-bedroom units in the $3,500 per month range. You went through my computer, James stood unsteadily. No, darling. You left it open on the kitchen counter, right next to the credit card statement showing charges at the Ritz-Carlton on days you were supposedly at conferences. Room 1247 to be specific. $389 per night, always charged to the corporate card. Robert's head snapped up at that. Tuesday afternoons, usually, I supplied helpfully. Always the same room, always charged to the corporate card. Total charges over the past 4 months, $6,224. That's for client meetings, James protested. Which client? Because your secretary, lovely woman named Carol, very chatty when I call looking for you, mentioned you don't have client meetings on Tuesdays. That's your golf afternoon. Except you haven't been to the golf course either. I called the club. The silence stretched. Emma was edging toward the door. Smart girl. What Patricia and James didn't realize was that I'd been preparing for this moment for months. Not just the recordings, though those would be devastating in divorce court. I'd been building a comprehensive case with my attorney, Helen Crawford, one of the best family lawyers in the state. Helen charged $650 per hour, and I'd already invested $23,400 in building an airtight case. Helen had been thorough. We documented everything. James's separate bank account at First National, funded by unauthorized transfers totaling $34,600 from our joint account. His hotel charges on the company card for supposed client meetings that didn't exist. The apartments he'd been viewing without telling me, including signed applications for 3 different properties. Patricia's interference in our marriage, including her documented attempts to sabotage my career by calling my gallery contacts and spreading rumors about my instability. Calls I'd traced through phone records Helen had subpoenaed. We'd also done a complete financial audit with my accountant, David Chen. What we'd found was illuminating. While James earned his $78,000 salary, his spending had significantly outpaced his income over the past 3 years. The separate account he'd opened was already overdrawn by $8,900. His father's company, where he'd been coasting in the same position without advancement, was struggling financially. Robert had been propping up James's lifestyle for years through bonuses that were actually personal loans totaling $67,000. Something Patricia apparently didn't know. Meanwhile, my art career had exploded beyond anything I'd expected. The conservative estimate Helen had done of my assets, the house valued at $2 million, my artwork collection valued at $890,000, my investment portfolio worth $1 a million, and my business accounts containing $340,000. Put me in a completely different financial category than James or his family had ever realized. I should go, Emma said quietly. This is clearly a family matter. Oh, don't leave on my account, I said. Stay for dessert. I made Patricia's favorite lemon tart from scratch. Of course, artists have so much free time between creating work that sells for tens of thousands of dollars. Stop this, Patricia hissed. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I pulled out my phone again. Should I play the recording from Thanksgiving where you told Vivian you were handling the Meredith problem and had budgeted $15,000 for legal fees? Or the one from last month where you called Elite Matchmaking Services and offered them a $5,000 finder's fee? Patricia's face went from red to white. You recorded private conversations in my own home? Perfectly legal in this state, I smiled. My lawyer confirmed it. Single-party consent law. Oh, that reminds me, James. You'll be getting a letter from my attorney after the holidays. I thought it would be nicer to wait until after Christmas. Your attorney? James sobered slightly. Meredith, let's discuss this privately. Like you discussed Emma privately? I gestured to the blonde, who was now backing toward the door. No, I think we're past private discussions. You want a divorce? Fine. But we're doing it on my terms, not your mother's timeline. You can't divorce him. Patricia stood, knocking over her wine glass. You're nothing without this family, just some bohemian artist with delusions of grandeur. Patricia. Robert's voice cut through her tirade. Sit down. We all turned to stare. Robert hadn't used that tone in years. Sit down, he repeated, then turned to Emma. Miss Weatherford, I apologize for this evening. My wife clearly misled you. Please accept my apologies and my assurance that this won't affect any professional relationship with your firm. Emma nodded and practically ran for the door. I watched her leave, knowing she'd dodged a bullet she didn't even realize had been aimed at her. Now, Robert continued, his voice deadly calm, would someone like to explain why my son has been charging hotel rooms to the company card for non-existent client meetings, and why my wife has been arranging replacements for a marriage that isn't even over, and why we're having this conversation at Christmas dinner? She trapped him, Patricia burst out. She seduced him with her bohemian ways and then refused to give him children. I was protecting our legacy. Your legacy is a son who can't stand up to his mother and a daughter who's on her third husband, I replied. Some legacy. I dare because I'm done. I walked around the table, stopping beside Robert. I'm sorry it has to end this way. You've always been kind to me. He nodded sadly. I'm sorry too, Meredith. You deserved better from this family. Dad, James protested. Whose side are you on? The side of decency, Robert replied, which seems to be in short supply at this table. The next few weeks moved with the precision of a well-orchestrated legal campaign. Helen filed the divorce papers on December 28th, and the recordings proved even more damaging than we'd anticipated. Patricia's admission that she'd been handling the Meredith problem by finding James a replacement wife, combined with evidence of James's affair and financial misconduct, made the case straightforward. The private investigator Helen had recommended, Marcus Stone, had done excellent work for his $4,800 fee. He documented James's Tuesday afternoon visits to the Ritz-Carlton, complete with photographs and credit card receipts. More damaging were the photos of James entering and leaving the hotel with a woman who wasn't Emma. Apparently, Patricia's matchmaking efforts had been more successful than she'd realized. Just not with the candidate she'd chosen. James had been using company resources for personal expenses, something that didn't sit well with Robert once the full extent became clear. The hotel charges were just the beginning. Marcus had uncovered personal purchases, inflated expense reports, and unauthorized use of company credit cards totaling $73,400 over 18 months. Robert's reaction was swift and decisive. James found himself not just divorced, but unemployed. The company couldn't risk the liability of keeping him on after the financial irregularities came to light. Robert's attorney, Thomas Brennan, had been very clear. Termination for cause was the only option that protected the company from potential criminal liability. Patricia's social standing took an immediate hit as well. The recordings of her manipulations and her role in orchestrating the affair spread through their social circle faster than she could contain them. The Westchester Country Club asked her to resign from the events committee. The Children's Hospital Charity Board requested her immediate resignation after donors began asking uncomfortable questions. Her bridge club simply stopped inviting her. Emma Weatherford, smart woman that she was, had done her own research after that disastrous dinner. She sent Helen a formal letter disclaiming any romantic involvement with James and providing additional evidence of Patricia's matchmaking scheme that proved useful in court. She also forwarded emails from Patricia detailing the financial benefits of marrying into the family, emails that became Exhibit A in our case. The financial settlement was exactly what our prenup specified. We each kept what we'd brought to the marriage. For James, that meant his overdrawn bank account, his damaged reputation, and approximately $23,000 in credit card debt. For me, it meant the house, my thriving art career, and my investment portfolio. But the real victory came 6 months later, when my retrospective at the Whitmore Gallery opened to rave reviews. Patricia had spent years dismissing my hobby, but the sold-out opening night and subsequent museum acquisitions made it clear that my art career was anything but a waste of time. The retrospective generated $1 million in sales, with 3 pieces acquired by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. James tried reaching out several times in the months following the divorce, usually late at night after he'd been drinking. The messages ranged from angry to pleading to bitter. I saved them all, Helen's advice, but never responded. Helen had been very clear that any communication could be used against me if James decided to contest the settlement. Vivian's third marriage ended around the same time as mine, ironically enough. She'd apparently learned Patricia's manipulation tactics a little too well, and her husband's family had even less patience for interference than I'd had. Her divorce was messier than mine, no prenup, and her husband's attorney was less generous than Helen had been with James. Robert was the only one who emerged with his dignity intact. He'd quietly supported me throughout the divorce proceedings, even testifying about James's misuse of company resources when required. We still exchange Christmas cards, and he occasionally stops by the gallery when I have shows. He's purchased 3 of my pieces over the past year, paying full asking price despite my offers of a family discount. The house in Westchester, the one Patricia had always assumed belonged to James, became my sanctuary. I converted James's former office into additional studio space and finally had room to work on the large-scale pieces I'd always wanted to attempt. The renovation cost $47,000, but the increased workspace allowed me to take on commissions I'd previously had to decline. The financial independence I'd worked toward for years became complete freedom. No more scheduling my creativity around James's needs or Patricia's demands. No more pretending my career was secondary to maintain family peace. No more birth control pills hidden in vitamin bottles to avoid Patricia's lectures about grandchildren. Helen had been right about the recordings being the key to everything. They not only proved Patricia's orchestration of the affair, but demonstrated a pattern of psychological manipulation that the court found particularly disturbing. The judge's comments during the final hearing made it clear that Patricia's behavior had significantly influenced his decision to deny James any claim to marital assets. Looking back, the most satisfying part wasn't the financial victory or even Patricia's social embarrassment. It was the moment when I realized I'd been preparing for this confrontation for months without even knowing it. Every recording, every documented conversation, every careful financial record had built toward that Christmas dinner revelation. James eventually moved to Albany, where Robert helped him find work with a former business associate at a significantly reduced salary of $52,000 per year. The job came with strict oversight and no access to company credit cards. Patricia lost much of her social influence once the recordings became known in their circle. But she still lives in the same neighborhood, though several of her former friends have grown notably distant. As for Emma Weatherford, she sent me a bottle of Dom Perignon when my retrospective opened, with a note thanking me for the most educational dinner party she'd ever attended. She'd learned, she wrote, to always research the family dynamics before accepting social invitations from potential matchmakers. She'd also started requiring detailed background checks on any clients Patricia might refer to her firm. The best part of my new life was the simplicity. No more family dinners where I had to smile through insults about my career. No more carefully managing James's fragile ego while building my own professional success. No more Patricia's passive-aggressive comments about my reproductive choices. Just me, my art, my house, and the freedom to build whatever life I wanted. 7 years of strategic patience had paid off in ways I never could have imagined when I first started recording those conversations. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well and having excellent documentation. The final tally was impressive. I'd retained assets worth approximately $5 a million, while James left the marriage with debts exceeding $31,000 and no steady income. Patricia's social rehabilitation would take years, if it was possible at all, and I had a thriving art career that no one could ever again dismiss as a hobby. Helen had been right from the beginning. Preparation and documentation were everything. The 6 months I'd spent building my case had been worth every hour and every dollar invested. The recordings alone had saved me potentially hundreds of thousands in contested divorce proceedings. As I hung my latest painting in the studio that had once been James's office, I couldn't help but smile. Patricia had been right about one thing. I did spend my time playing with paint. The difference was my paintings were now worth more than James would earn in the next 5 years combined.